This person show up in their toxic ways, right? But let me choose to honor myself, respect myself. I think it always starts with talking about it, right? And that's one of the critical pieces of developing our self-awareness. A feeling in itself lasts for about 60 to 90 seconds. There's a huge distinction, right, between an emotional reaction and a choice. So consciously making a decision to set that boundary and enforce that.
Welcome back to the Healing Train. What a journey it's been. Last season was full of truth, tears, breakthroughs, and deep connection. Thank you for showing up, for listening, and for being brave enough to heal with me. This season, we're going even deeper. Expect raw, honest conversations with guests from around the world, survivors, experts, healers, each bringing powerful stories and wisdom to remind you you're not alone and your healing matters. If you're carrying pain, confusion, or questions that feel too heavy to hold on your own, this space is for you. Take a breath, come as you are, and know this: healing isn't always pretty, but it's always worth it. And together, we'll keep moving, one stop at a time. So hop back on and let's ride. Today's guest, we have Elaine Dickens, a registered psychotherapist, founded Live Inspired Counseling and Live Inspired Wellness, Inc. With a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in counseling psychology, she offers personalized client-centered therapy in Uxbridge, Ontario, and online. As a neurodiversity and trauma-informed therapist, Elaine helps high achievers balance success and well-being. Her eclectic approach blends cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, solution-focused therapy, SFT, and existential techniques to nurture emotional intelligence and self-compassion. A certified P positive parenting program trainer and coach, Elaine supports professionals and parents with evidence-based positive parenting strategies. She aims to guide clients towards fulfilling lives and thriving in careers and relationships, while honoring neurodiversity and fostering resilience and growth. Let's get into our talk with Elaine. Sometimes healing makes you realize that the only answer to disrespect, betrayal, or any negative situation is distance. You choose to walk away because you no longer want to react, argue, or fight to prove your point. Instead, you simply prefer to remove yourself from the conversation and the situation that affects your peace of mind. By Teresa Medina, Raising Your Frequency. Elaine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rania. It's a beautiful opportunity for conversation. Thank you for the invitation.
Elaine, I want to dive right into this very important topic because it hits home for me. And it's about distancing yourself from people who have continuously hurt you or trigger you, sometimes unknowingly cause you to relive your trauma. And when we distance ourselves, we're being called names. One of them is that we're being selfish. So, in your expertise, what would you say about that? Is it selfish to distance yourself or to cut people off if you have to?
So many things, so many thoughts in my mind. What a great question. I think a couple of things come first and foremost to the front of my mind. I think it can feel very selfish to make that choice. It often comes, I think, after years of perhaps hurt, as you mentioned, and pain. I think internally for the person setting that boundary, it can feel rather selfish. So I think that when the other party uses that name, I think it is very personally triggering and deeply wounding. But what I also know about setting boundaries, which can be you pulling back yourself energetically, is that when we show up in a different way, when we assert ourselves, or even in this example, when we choose ourselves, that can be really triggering for that other person. They're just not used to receiving us in that way. We're acting differently. We're not following the pattern or the script. So taking back your power, I believe, is what is most triggering for that individual.
So we can say that we're both being triggered. The person that's being
Absolutely.
hurt and the person that's unknowingly, possibly, or knowingly hurting. So,
Absolutely.
but we deal with things differently. Obviously, the person who's being hurt wants to protect themselves,
Of course.
and
Absolutely.
the other person, just like you said, is used to you accepting and is finding it strange now. Hey, all of a sudden, what's going on? Why?
Absolutely.
And then that's when they say, you've changed.
And
And
that can also again be triggering, right? It's very difficult. It's a very different way of using your voice and asserting your needs, and sometimes being questioned by that other party, especially when there's a power dynamic at play, right? It can really rattle us inside, can't it?
And at times when the person trying to protect themselves from that person and distancing themselves or cutting themselves off, often there comes a feeling of guilt. How can we advise people who do feel those feelings of guilt when they're looking out for themselves not to feel guilty, if that's even possible?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I can really guide anyone into how not to feel a certain way,
Of course.
right? Our feelings are part of our humanness, right? I think what I would encourage us to do here is to notice that small part of ourselves, perhaps this very young part of ourselves that may, I would even say, temporarily feel guilty, right? Like what research has shown us about feelings is a feeling in itself lasts for about 60 to 90 seconds, right? That's the duration of a feeling. Beyond that, I mean, our thoughts kick in and they will fuel a feeling. We may sit in a mood for a day, 3 days, right? And prolong that emotional experience. But I would encourage folks to sit with that small part of themselves that's triggered, that feels guilty or uncertain, and to just notice it and tend to it. I think the tendency is to want to push those uncomfortable feelings away, right? To push them aside, to plow through them, to not acknowledge them. I think that's exactly the recipe for disaster. We have to sit and feel.
Yeah, the key word from what I'm hearing from you is awareness. Is to be aware, self-aware.
Yeah, I think it is part of self-awareness. Absolutely.
And not judging yourself for the way you feel.
You took the words right out of my mouth. To sit in a gentleness and a kindness for yourself, to have empathy for yourself as you navigate this new territory.
There's a reason why we do distance ourselves. It's not like we just decided one morning to wake up and say, okay, I don't want to talk to this person anymore. We're most of the time responding, or in most of the cases we're reacting, right? But as long as we are aware that we're not reacting to as a means of punishment, right? Because this is where the distancing of oneself or cutting someone off can be confused with the silent treatment that is used, bad intent from certain people who have tendency for toxic patterns and toxic behavior. So they use the withholding of communication as means of punishment or control. And I think we need to discern the difference between when you're hurt and there's a reason why you're doing what you're doing, and you're doing it in a loving way, at least by letting the person know, hey, I just don't want to talk right now, or I'm just not feeling good. Let's talk about this later. You're not giving the silent treatment. You're just simply choosing yourself. Again, setting the boundary. But of course, the other person, well, okay, not all the times, but in some cases, it will try to make you feel guilty and tell you, hey, you're acting like a narcissist right now. You're giving me the silent treatment. Meanwhile, you aren't. You're just protecting yourself from them.
And that's why I think we need to make that distinction, right? I love the word that you used there, was choosing, right? When we're emotional, right, we can have very immediate emotional responses. We may say something or do something that may lead to regret, right? But choosing is different, right? Choosing is noticing that sad part of myself, that hates the idea of perhaps even setting a boundary or withdrawing from this connection or this communication. right? But also consciously making a decision to set that boundary and enforce that. There's a huge distinction, right, between an emotional reaction and a choice, but also consciously making a decision to set that boundary and enforce that. And we need to be grounded and in our power in order to choose the way we want to proceed.
Wow, beautiful. Elaine, do you think there are other methods we can use when, other than distancing ourselves from people who sometimes hurt us?
Mhm. I think, a couple of things come to mind. I often think, that emotional regulation, us learning how to control our body's thermostat, there's so much power in that, Rania, so much power. And I think it's often an underutilized strategy. It's this idea of you have this tendency sort of to run like a thermometer, right? If I'm angry, I'm running too hot that day. If I'm, maybe anxious or overwhelmed, I'm running a little bit too cool. When we support our body's thermostat, we're like that device that hangs on the wall. We can read the room accurately, right? So if the room is too cool, we can kick it up a couple notches. If the temperature is too warm, we can drop to 72, where we have that comfortable level, and everyone is thriving and feeling that comfort. So I think working on ourselves, I think that's self-care, and I think working on our emotional regulation skills, being able to take a step back to notice those emotional parts and to choose how to respond with discernment. I think that's like one of the most underrated approaches we can do here. It's choosing you and pouring yourself into your own power, grounding yourself.
And that definitely comes if a person is in a state of self-awareness. But there are many people out there, for example, those who are in really toxic relationships that you and I have discussed about the subject before. And if you are stuck in that kind of dynamic with narcissism or whatnot, physical abuse at home or verbal abuse, you're not aware that this is what indeed is happening, and you're not aware of your emotions. Even you're just in fight or flight mode.
Absolutely. My mind goes to the stages of readiness, right? And so I think there's a point when that self-awareness, there's sort of like a small shift, right? I think we start to notice perhaps the patterns in the communication and the toxicity as you sort of journey towards deepening your awareness. I think as humans, we're always, unconsciously, consciously trying to become more self-aware. But I think often that first step is choosing not to be alone with it, right? And if that's confiding in someone, if that's starting a conversation, if that's Googling what your next steps are, you really just are at a different spot on that journey of change. So I'm hopeful, and think about your audience, of course, finding a podcast like this, connecting and doing a consultation with someone like a coach, finding a therapist, right? Joining a support group, joining a spiritual community, right? I think those are all small steps that we can take towards supporting ourselves. And I hope that those are available.
Definitely. No, these are great tips. Now let's talk about the other person, Elaine. We were talking about the person who's in pain and trying to figure out a way to deal with it. Let's talk a little bit about the person who exhibits those toxic patterns, behaviors, tendencies, whatever we might want to call them and label them. Why is it that there are people out there who exhibit those toxic patterns? Why is it part of their daily life and they're so used to it and they continue, I want to say, choose to be like that?
Yeah, I mean, we could have a whole hour perhaps just to unpack this one question. There's so many things, perhaps to acknowledge. I think, I always think of intergenerational patterns first, Rania. I do, right? A lot of, our blueprint for how we communicate with, adults and even the young people in our lives, it comes from our family. It's a blueprint that we are, I hate to say, it's almost stamped on our foreheads. We're birthed with it, right? We all have this sort of family blueprint that we inherit. And sometimes that blueprint journeys with an individual for their entire lifetime. They just literally know no different. Over time, we can change that blueprint, right? Consciously, we can make adjustments. We can deepen our self-awareness. We can work on our self-regulation. We can work on our emotional intelligence, which is my topic of interest.
Yeah.
But there are folks who journey with that original template, right? And, at the end of the day, they often receive that type of love and conditioning within their families. It was gifted to them. What we acknowledge is there are a number of gaps, right? But it's often that individual's experience. They embody that blueprint continues with them unless there is conscious change.
No, again, it's a choice. You can choose to get out of it, right? But first you have to choose that you are doing something that isn't the greatest. To develop this, the only word that's coming to mind now, again, is awareness of your actions and your behaviors, how it's affecting others, to be alert to that.
Mm-hmm.
And many
Absolutely.
aren't. Many aren't.
And that's the thing, right? I think, Mel Robbins' new book, The Let Them Theory, I know that's another topic of discussion that you and I have shared, right? I think it does a really beautiful job of just reminding us at the end of the day, we can hope that partner, chooses to show up differently or chooses to deepen their ability to communicate and gains that awareness into these toxic patterns. But at the end of the day, what we know is we can't change any one person, right? Other than ourselves. So, one small hesitation probably around that word choice, right? I think that's assuming that it's at a conscious level. I'm just reminded that many of these patterns are so well ingrained that they exist both consciously and unconsciously. It can very much be a blind spot, just when that self-awareness is lacking. I hate to say.
No, I agree with you. There's definitely many scenarios and many dynamics, and we don't know all of them. I guess where I come from is I come from an experience where I did deal with a narcissistic individual. And with my experience, I can share that it was brought to his attention how his behavior is unacceptable and hurting me. But he continuously did. And continuously raised the abuse. So for me, that's a choice.
Yeah,
it's not that you're not aware anymore. You're 100% aware how it's affecting me. I am crying here in front of you, and yet you're still continuing to do it. That's a choice. You're actually ignoring me altogether, ignoring my feelings, and all you're doing is you're self-absorbed, thinking about your need to dominate or control or whatever it is that may be the scenario, the insecurities. Of course, like you said, there's many explanations to it.
Many functions.
Right. But yeah, so you're right. It's not always a choice, but there are certain situations it is a choice. And what I want women to understand, not to give a free pass to people and just say, oh, well, just poor them. They're just there. That's what they were raised to, because it's a fine line.
Oh, absolutely.
Fine line that we can be too nice, and we want to be kind and loving, and we don't want to be like the toxic person.
No.
So we want to keep on giving them the benefit of the doubt. But at some point, we need to stop doing that and look after ourselves. And I love that you mentioned the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins, and I read her book as well, which is like, let them choose how they want to treat me, let them be who they are, but then let me choose for myself. Do I want to tolerate this?
Yeah.
Do I deserve this or deserve better?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my mind goes to needs, right? When you were talking about feeling guilty earlier, right? I think that's often, a dynamic. And I often meet people in this place, right? If they are used to prioritizing their partner's needs, right? They may have poured all of their heart and all of their love into this relationship only to have this really unfortunate experience, even like your own that you described, right? It can feel really we can feel really guilty when we acknowledge our own needs. And I think that's what also Mel Robbins' books reminds us too, with that let me part at the end, right? Let this person show up in their toxic ways, right? But let me choose to honor myself, respect myself, right? But, expressing our needs can really trigger that guilty part of us, especially if we're used to prioritizing other people's needs. Certainly as women, we are conditioned as such. We are the givers, we are the nurturers, we are the unconditional love, right? So I think that's why that guilt comes up a lot in this stage of, your listeners' awareness.
Mm-hmm. You also wonder sometimes if you're abandoning the person that you love. And I can tell you
Oh,
that is something I personally experienced, because I felt like I promised I would be there by his side as if I'm responsible to his healing, as if, right? But that's a mistake I made and I learned the hard way. And that's why I'm trying to educate others not to fall into the same trap I did, not to take on something on your shoulders that was never yours to begin with. You can't heal someone. You can't be the conduit. You can't continue being there just so you can prove to that person that, hey, I love you. Hey, you don't have to feel so alone or that you have to prove yourself or to need validation. I love you the way you are. No, you don't love them the way they are, because if they're abusing you, you can't love them that way. And it's not abandonment. We need to shift that again. You're not abandoning them. You're choosing yourself.
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth, right? And both partners' needs are important. It's not that any one partner's needs are more important than the other, right? But I think what you're describing is that internal shift that happens, right? You, as the person, who's being abused, realizes this is not aligned internally with who I am and what I aspire to be. But it can feel very selfish to pull back that energy and to even acknowledge and then express your own needs. Like, these are skills, right? And these are skills that we often need to develop and deepen, because they may not come naturally. They may not come to us in our emotional blueprint.
I agree with you 100%. So, for example, when I'm talking about myself and how I stood up to myself, it's because I've been already doing the work on me. There was self-awareness, right? I am seeing things for what they are. I'm not justifying it. I'm not excusing it. I see it for what it is. Was I still in the trauma? Absolutely.
Absolutely. And fight and flight, right? Freeze, appease.
But
right?
Because I've been doing the work on me, educating myself, asking for help, support, reading, watching, whatever it is, listening, this is what I would recommend to anyone who finds themselves in this situation. If there is doubt, if there is confusion, if you don't know where this is normal, not normal, okay,
Absolutely.
not okay, instead of just justifying it and just put it under the rug and thinking everything is going to work itself out by itself, dig, find out more,
Absolutely.
get yourself, reach out for help.
Yeah, talk about it. Right. I often think, like, what is the best, way for us to, move forward, to make changes, to be intentional? I think it always starts with talking about it. Right. And that's one of the critical pieces of developing our self-awareness. Right. I think that's how we tackle shame. I think that's how we, navigate those young parts of ourselves, that doubtful part that you just described, the fearful part, the guilty part of us. Even that angry part, right? Because I often think just, as I heard you talk about your experience, I couldn't help but just think of, you in that dynamic and just not having your voice heard, right? And that's another part of that blueprint.
A brief stop at a station. Those of you who ended a toxic relationship, share with someone who will benefit from your experience. We are here to support each other. What happened after you stood up to yourself, called them out, or maybe broke up and left them? Did they act surprised like they never abused you? Hoovered, tried to get you back? Fake apologies? Fake promises to change and be better if you just give them one more chance? Or did they cut you out like you never existed? Tried to ruin your image and reputation? Made up lies to anyone who would listen in your circle? Or maybe found the next victim to replace you in a jiffy? Share your story. What did you do? How did you feel? How did you get yourself out? What gave you the courage to stand up to yourself and take action to save yourself? What were your main struggles? What was the most difficult thing you had to overcome after you left them? Send a voice note recording up to 5 minutes answering these questions, which will be in the description in the notes. Telling your story with the intention to help others in their journey of reclaiming back their power and healing. Send to guest@healingtrain.ca. Stay tuned for this special episode. Be ready to listen to inspiring and life-altering stories, real, raw, and remarkable. You don't want to miss this journey on the Healing Train. This show is proudly sponsored by Say It Out Loud GG, led by the inspiring Judith Diaz, an avid change maker and passionate advocate for speaking up and raising awareness. The Healing Train podcast is honored to have her support. Now let's get back to the show. And in my line of work, I've also noticed with my clients that many times we end up in those type of dynamics or relationships, especially if it's like a relationship not being raised in a family of, because that one you don't choose, it's just you're born into that. But if you find yourself you're in this kind of toxicity or abuse or whatnot, it's because there is something within us that we needed to heal from. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was the light bulb moment when
that was an aha moment.
Yeah. But it was after I left, not during, because your judgment is so clouded and all you're thinking about is survival when you're in it. It is when I left it and I was doing the healing work is when I realized I needed to heal myself. And I took responsibility for being in those relationships for as long as I've allowed it. Because I needed to work on me.
Yeah, I think that's often I hear, right? And in the work that I do with folks around trauma, right? There's often that almost like a deep regret, right? Why did I stay as long as I did? Right. And as you said, so beautifully and succinctly, it's often available to us once we've made that choice, right? Once we've chosen ourselves. I think another common theme that comes to mind is the idea of, this is something that happened to you. And I always want my clients to know that, right? This is not because of a weakness that you have or a dysfunctionalness about you. This is when we're talking about trauma, this is what happens to us. It's not because of us.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I'd like to talk about forgiveness.
That's a big one. You're right.
Considering that we end up finding ourselves in these situations and we leave these toxic dynamics and we're going through the healing process, one of the stages or one of the phases in the healing process is forgiveness. And forgiveness is one of those topics where there's quite a bit of controversy on it because you have different opinions from different people. And of course, to each their own. There's no right or wrong answer, I believe. It's what's right for you. But generally speaking is what I want us to talk about. There are people who think that forgiveness equals allowing that person back in your life. Otherwise, it's not really forgiveness. And then there's the other,
I want to say.
Yeah. And then there's the other way of looking at forgiveness is that you're forgiving them so you could release yourself from anger, resentment, whatever feelings that had you in that traumatic experience. And it's for you to, again, part of taking your power back and moving on. But by no means are you obligated that when you forgive someone, that it's okay or that it should be, it must be.
We're not excusing.
That you start talking to that person again or bringing them back into your life. It is okay for you to say, I forgive you, but I no longer want you in my life because I that's for my well-being. And I'd like us to talk about that.
I think it's a great thing. I mean, I work with a lot of like high achievers, really smart folks, and who often have almost like a tendency to sort of intellectualize our feelings, right? So we think that when we're thinking about our feelings, that we're actually processing our feelings. I think it's a little bit deeper than that. That's what comes to mind here. Can we? I know some people are very triggered even over the word forgiveness. I am very cautious, especially in session with clients around that word itself. I tend to talk about more of the theme of acceptance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like having a little bit of an emotional distance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you said all those emotions, they're just a whirlpool, they're a tornado inside, perhaps, when the idea of forgiveness gets brought up. But at a basic level, can we accept that this is what has happened, right, in this relationship, in this pairing, and acknowledge that it wasn't a healthy dynamic, and our choice to, set those boundaries, to pull back, to remove ourselves, we were honoring ourselves as we did that,
Mm.
right? And as you did that, you were taking care of you in the best way that you could. So, in light of that, can we accept that this has happened? This is what happened to you,
Mm.
right? I don't know. I know it might sound so simple, right? I'm taking the word forgiveness and I'm offering the word acceptance, but I guess I'm curious what comes up.
No, I think as you're saying it, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling the word acceptance. It it isn't triggering.
It feels different.
Yeah, just accepting that what happened happened, right?
Mhm.
And you're it is distancing yourself from it, right? You're just
Mhm.
accepting what happened,
Mhm.
right? And that's it. And it ends right there. There's no
Mhm.
more to it.
Well,
The problem is when others in your life
I know.
start to impose and feel that they know better, or at least that they know you and what you should be doing. The word should, everybody's shoulding
Oh,
on
I
everybody,
cringe.
right? It's like, well, you said you forgive that person, so then what's the problem? And
Mhm.
that's what they say. And you're like, excuse me?
Mhm.
Excuse me?
Right?
It's, they're negating the fact that they did what they did just by making that statement.
Well, they're negating the pain that is attached with that, right? Like I think as I sit with that idea of forgiveness, or sorry, of acceptance,
Yeah.
right? We're shifting to that word here, right?
Yeah.
When I accept what has happened to me, right? When I accept this trauma, I sit with those painful parts of myself, right? Like the part of me that was hurt, the part of me that's been devastated, the part of me that's still angry, right? So I think processing those feelings is important as part of that, just to tidy up that piece around acceptance.
Mm.
But I think it's very difficult for us to explain and justify our choices to folks around us,
Yeah.
right? It just reminds me that there's a difference, Rania, between our perception,
Yeah.
right? And when you're in this dynamic, you of course have your perception of it,
Mm-hmm.
your beliefs about what you know to have been true and what to have happened,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think what we need to work towards is having perspective where we can appreciate that everybody, depending on where they are in the family or the community, sees
Yeah.
this dynamic between you and your ex-partner in a different light, right? So, can I accept that other people also have another perspective?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very important. Accepting that I am who I am, accepting
Mhm.
that I would lived what I lived through. There's no point of wondering, oh, what's wrong with me, or why did I stay for too long, or why did he or she do this to me, or why these people don't understand me. It's the acceptance of it is what it is, and knowing that you're the one that lived it, you're the
Mhm.
one that feels your feeling, and you have every right to feel your feelings. Your feelings are validated, right?
Always,
And
right?
other people are not always going to understand what you went through, and they can give whatever advice, but that's from their perspective. They
Perspective.
never
Yeah,
lived a day in your shoes, so they don't
yeah.
know what they're talking about. And we can do it acceptance lovingly. We don't
Mhm.
have to do acceptance by like, how dare you? You don't understand me. It doesn't need to be that way. It's just like,
Absolutely.
okay, it's all right. You don't get it, but that's all right. But I know how I feel.
Absolutely. And I think that's a beautiful response, right? If you are in the presence of somebody and they share a very different, view on what has happened, I think that's an opportunity for you to teach and to guide others, right? That wasn't my experience. I
Mm-hmm.
heard you say, and I chose myself, and that was really hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? You might even say something to someone like, "I'm surprised to hear you, say that way. It's not my experience." Right? I agree to disagree gently.
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that's part of the self-trust. And I picture that as part of the work that you do with your clients as well, is developing that internal compass and self-trust that we know is so important in your healing journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? Knowing that you made the best choices you could and the best information you had available to you at the time you made that choice,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even though wisdom and hindsight might say different.
Exactly, exactly. There are many people as well, Elaine, that for some reason think that therapy is BS. Okay?
Oh, they're
I'm gonna tell you that right now.
I know them. They come all week. They are here. Trust.
So I know we cannot change anyone's mind. It's everyone, you
No.
believe what you want to believe, but I'd like for you to share your therapy. You do cognitive behavioral therapy and solution focused therapy, and as I mentioned in your bio, can you share with us a bit some of your techniques, if you may, just generally speaking,
Yeah.
of what a session with you is like, and what type of topics do you cover, and how people can reach to you if they're looking to book a session.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I know that not everyone has a therapist in their, scheduled in their Outlook calendar, but I always think it can be another gift we give ourselves, right? So a lot of the work that I do with folks is around deepening their self-awareness and their self-regulation skills.
Mm-hmm.
I meet a lot of people who are burnt out, who have given a lot of themselves to their work, to their careers, but find themselves sort of burnt out, wavering on the edge of burnt out, or right at rock bottom. And so a lot of the work I end up doing with folks can be looking at the patterns, right? From a cognitive behavioral therapy lens, is looking at the patterns between our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions, and how we can create the changes that we're hoping to. So, where we can influence the feelings and the thoughts, that does directly in it changes how we behave and how we show up and our actions, of course. So I find it's a very powerful tool. The techniques and like they're practical, they're pragmatic things. It's
Mm-hmm.
not woo woo. It's concrete, evidence based ways to create change. And the same with solution focused. I think it's just a little bit of a different way of thinking about it. It's picturing ourselves and sort of actualizing, like, if this is the larger goal, this is where I want to be down the road.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the energetic blocks? What are some of the small stepping stones towards getting us towards that, like, really beautiful, deep connection that you want to have with your partner or with your children,
Mm-hmm.
or making a career change? And then I have work with couples, individuals, kids over the age of 10. But I would say primarily those are the two theories that I draw from, and a little bit of existentialism, thinking about purpose and our values,
Mm-hmm.
how we leverage curiosity, and, of course, emotional intelligence, right? I think that therapy is not something that we do because we have a problem. I have a very different approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many of my clients share that idea that therapy can be preventative, therapy can be
Mm-hmm.
an investment, therapy can be the same. I have clients that say, I don't spend money on alcohol, I don't go for massages, but I gift myself this opportunity, once every 4 or 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a special thing. And I think it ties into readiness. I think of myself. I was a huge skeptic when I went to my therapist for the first time. I did not know why I was there. I did not know what was expected. I was worried about letting her down,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what I learned is there was just so many opportunities to learn and be guided. And I was so grateful for that support that I just got hooked.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I see folks online and in person. So I see individuals right across the province. And I have a clinic in Uxbridge, Ontario. So offering in person there as well.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to talk about one more thing as you were speaking. It kind of hit me. I had a conversation not too long ago with someone dear to me. And as I was speaking about our traumatic experiences and how we need to heal from it in different ways, whether it be talk therapy or any other modalities that anyone
Mm-hmm.
chooses. And this person said to me, Rania, you make it sound that most people are living with trauma. And my response was, Yeah. I think
Hmm.
most of us actually have some sort of a trauma. Even like there's a big T and then there's the little t, I would
Hmm.
say. But I think it is inevitable. Like that's my opinion. And I'm just sharing my
I
opinion.
respect that opinion.
I feel that almost every single person on the face of this planet have some sort of trauma, and it's on a spectrum of some sort, where there's like you were traumatized just a little bit and then you were traumatized a lot. Right, and everything in between. And either we are aware of it or we're not aware of it. Maybe life brings it to the surface by the situations that we come across, and it's like right there in your face. Again, we have a choice to work through it or ignore it and sweep it under the rug and pretend nothing is wrong. But I guess my point, I don't want to blab on here, but my point is that what is your take on this? Like I shared my personal opinion
Mhm.
is that I feel that we all have some sort of a trauma from little to big. What do
Mhm.
you think?
Absolutely, right? I can think of, even from childhood, right? Something simply as being dismissed by a parent, right? Having a parent sigh, having a parent slam a door, having a parent withdraw their love,
Mm,
right? So, I mean, your word is trauma. I heard you say, right? I believe we've all had traumas, and perhaps it's the compounding of all these traumas that, big, little, small, doesn't matter. No, it's in my world the combination, perhaps the
mm,
magnitude in which we've been touched. But I do subscribe to the idea that we all have things we can heal from,
mhm, mhm.
right? So, like, are we saying the same thing? Yes, I believe we are. But I never want to discount something that, somebody would say, well, I don't want anybody to discount their trauma because it's not as large as somebody else's trauma. Trauma is trauma. If it was
Mm.
traumatic for you, then it's worth our attention, our time, and our tenderness. So I always want to discourage people from, saying, but I didn't have it as bad as somebody else,
Right.
right? It wasn't quite to the degree.
Mhm.
Um,
It's being dismissive of the
we
feelings.
don't compare our traumas.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
not something I want folks to do.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. I agree with that.
We don't rate them. We don't compare them to our friends. We don't discount our own experiences. They're all
Because
relevant.
you lived it, and that's all that
Absolutely.
matters. You
Absolutely.
lived whatever it is that you went through, that you call whatever you want to call.
Yeah.
Look at that. I love
Yeah.
this. This conversation can go on and on, Elaine.
I
I
know we could do
honestly,
like a whole podcast together, right?
I truly did enjoy this talk and all the topics that we covered. Was there anything that you want to leave us with? Any last words? Anything you want to correct me on that I said
I
that you?
never, no, I am always grateful for the conversation and just, continue to be blown away by your vulnerability and your gift of sharing. So just grateful to be part of and have that dialogue this morning. Thank you, Ronya.
Before you hop off the train, if something in today's ride stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it. Hit follow and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Want to dive deeper or have a topic you'd love us to explore? I'm all ears. Drop your questions, thoughts, or suggestions. We're in this healing journey together, and your voice matters here. Just drop a message to guest@healingtrain.ca. I am listening. And until next time, keep on healing you and keep riding with me on the healing train.